What's up? Today I'd like to share with you an opening to crush your opponents who play pawn to e4 against you. The way to go is to play pawn to d5, known as the Scandinavian Defense, and after white captures the pawn, you go knight to f6. And what's really cool about the variations which I'm about to share with you is that lots of them give you very simple forcing victory against most played moves by white, which is really cool, and again I'm gonna share with you everything. First of all, the most common move here is pawn to d4, which is known as the main line, and I actually recorded recently the video where I shared with you the so-called Portuguese Gambit, how you can go bishop g4 here and take the initiative position and get a lot of great attacking opportunities right there. So if you haven't watched that video yet, you may do so before watching this video or afterwards. And after I published that video, a couple of players asked me in the comments like, hey Igor, you're telling us that d4 is the main move, but why not to protect the pawn by playing pawn to c4? It seems like it makes a lot more sense for white. And therefore I decided to record today's video for you guys, showing you how to react if white plays pawn to c4, because indeed some of your opponents will play that move. It looks very logical for white to just keep this pawn and seemingly get in a great position. The way to go for black here, which I recommend you to use, is to play pawn to e6. This is the most aggressive reaction of black, because some players actually here play pawn to c6, but in this case you gotta be ready for white to play pawn to d4, which transposes into one of the lines of the Caracan defense, and it's a little bit of a different story. While it's still playable, I would recommend that you here in this position play pawn to e6, because this is the most aggressive, the most gambit line way of playing this opening. White will probably capture your pawn here, you recapture with the bishop, and at this point you can already start seeing the first ideas behind this gambit. As usual, when you're sacrificing material, you're hoping to compensate it by some other factors, usually by the huge activity of your pieces, hoping to create an attack against your opponent. Even in this particular position, you can already see that black already developed two of their minor pieces. They also have an easy way to develop the rest of their pieces, while white still has most of their pieces or all of their pieces on their initial squares, as well as they're having a couple weak squares right here in the center because their c pawn has been advanced in the previous move. That's why it gives black the chance to finalize their development quickly and to rush into the attack against the white's king. And I'm going to show you exactly how you can do this. Usually in this position your opponents will play pawn to d4 to cover those weaknesses as well as to prepare development of the bishop. In this case you go bishop b4 check. You start putting some pressure onto the white's position right away. The most common move for white here is knight to c3, makes sense to cover the king, and there you go knight to e4. Threatening this knight, notice that the knight is pinned, and therefore white cannot just go ahead and take your knight. It is quite the opposite. You are threatening to capture the knight and afterwards to create some more problems for white. At first it looks like there are many different ways for white to protect his knight, but in fact a lot of these moves do not work for different reasons. For example, if they decide to protect this knight by another knight, in this case the bishop is not protecting the c4 pawn anymore, and you can just go ahead and capture it, thus winning your pawn back and keeping the strong pressure against the white's position. Therefore that's not an option for white. Let's take a move back and see what else white can do here. If they try something like queen to c2, which is a standard reaction in some other openings, in this case it fails to queen takes d4. Again, you're grabbing the pawn, also putting even more pressure to this pinned knight, and therefore it is totally bad for white as well. So if this thing doesn't work, what if they just go bishop d2, another standard move here? In this case, it still fails due to the same reason, queen takes d4, winning the pawn back. And there is also one fun fact, let me share it with you right here. Let me show you the database of real games played online mostly, and you can see here what your opponents will likely to do here. So you go pawn to e6, this so-called Icelandic Gambit, they take it, you recapture by the bishop, they go pawn to d4, just like we analyzed, you go bishop b4, knight c3 is the most played move by far, you respond with knight to e4, and now look at this. The vast majority of your opponents will go bishop to d2, which is actually completely wrong because it fails due to queen takes d4, just like we discussed. But here's the fun fact. Aside of knight takes e4, which is okay for white, even though you still have an advantage here. A lot of your opponents will actually go for knight to f3, trying to threaten your queen, but in this case it's obviously just queen takes f2, very funny checkmate. You can see how quickly it can get really dangerous for white in this opening. Alright, let's go into the proper reaction for white, which is queen to d3. This way white protects both the pawn as well as the knight, and also questions your knight on e4. In this case, instead of taking on c3, you can play bishop to f5, keeping up the pressure onto the white's position. The opposition of your bishop to the white's queen is also somewhat uncomfortable for white, because you always threaten to jump with this knight away somewhere and to attack his queen. Notice that the white's knight is still pinned, therefore they can never capture your knight because there is their king behind, right? Another good thing for black here for repositioning their bishop to f5 is that it opens up the e-file where the white's king is standing, and therefore black also hopes to castle very quickly, and after that to place their rook to e8 and to take advantage of this open e-file and to start attacking, the white's king, which is also another idea which black would use very frequently. Anyway, let's see what happened in this game. In this game, white played queen to f3, trying to remove the queen from this dangerous square on d3, and also to finally trying to get rid of all these annoying black pieces. But black played a super calm move, knight to c6, which is really worthwhile remembering. At first it looks like white attacked your bishop and you're gonna do something about it. But it turns out that you don't have to worry about this at all, because you're also threatening their knight right there on c3, and the queen must protect it, or else you'll grab it, and after that you'll also start attacking the other white pieces standing behind. And therefore the queen cannot really go away from that f3 square anyway, or at least you don't have to worry about this. And that is why black very calmly ignored the white's threat and just brought one more piece into the attack, threatening knight takes d4. White captured the bishop, because what else could they do? Black recaptured the knight on c3, so the material balance is still even. And what can white do now? If they recapture, it's probably really bad, because then you recapture with the bishop, attacking the king, the rook. The king is, generally speaking, very exposed here. You're threatening to also capture that pawn on d4. Here white is completely devastated, and that is definitely not an option. So let's take a move back. Instead of grabbing the knight, in this game they played bishop d2, which seems to be making a lot more sense. And it even looks like black is still having a little bit of problems with this knight. But there is a great follow-up for black here. You go queen to e7 first of all, which is check. After that, white needs to cover their king, so they go knight to e2 or bishop to e2, it doesn't really matter, because after that you go for this series of exchanges, and here there is a beautiful finish of the game. I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. Maybe you'll be able to find the following move of black on your own. I'm just giving you a few more seconds to think about it, and that is queen takes e2, which is a temporary sacrifice, because after that you go knight takes d4, forking the king and the queen. Thus on the next move you just grab that queen back, and now you're simply having this extra piece, and it's time for white to resign. Now let me show you another cool line for black, which also gives you an almost immediate victory. It goes into the same line, pawn takes, knight to f6, white goes pawn to c4, and also somebody asked me, what if white goes bishop to c4? Well, in this case you've got a game of chess. What can I say? I cannot really show you every possible continuation of white and black. You're obviously gonna recapture right here, and after that you're just having a normal game of chess. So you cannot always trick your opponent and win immediately, but you have to rely on your general chess skills and understanding. And by the way, let me invite you to attend my free masterclass, The Best Way to Improve at Chess Instantly, by clicking the link on the screen or below the video, which will help you to advance your general skills and to achieve your chess goals, whatever they are. Becoming a title player, or just getting that 2000 rating, or becoming a local champion with GOT students who achieved all of these goals, and even the World Amateur Championships victory with GOT for our students. So definitely you may wish to check this out. And now let's continue with the line which I was about to share with you, which is the line pawn to c4, pawn to e6, this Icelandic Gambit. After d4, we go bishop b4 check. White covers the king, you go knight to e4. Some players try to keep playing aggressively as white and they go pawn to d5. They don't want to defend, they want to counterattack. And indeed, if you start capturing here on c3 right away, it creates some complications. But instead, there is a really cool move for black, which is a shocker for your opponent. Instead of grabbing the white's knight, you go queen to f6. You're putting more pressure onto the knight, but even more importantly, your queen is now eyeing to the f2 square, aiming to just grab it and to checkmate white. And now white is just losing. It is so powerful, and also probably is going to be a really unpleasant surprise for your opponent. For example, if white would cover the f2 square, which is the best reaction for white, or else they would just lose immediately, then you happily grab that knight on c3, and now you're attacking their king as well as the rook on a1. And even though they can capture your bishop, but you won the exchange, you won the rook. And after bishop e2 and you just bring your bishop back, now you won the rook against a bishop, and also you've got an extra pawn, therefore a totally winning position. Now let's take a look at the second most popular option for white. So far we always analyze the move knight to c3 covering the king, which is the most natural reaction of white. But another move which is also natural is playing bishop to d2. What are you going to do here? In this case, you may play queen to e7 in order to support your bishop on b4 and also to keep up the pressure. Notice that from the e7 square, your queen is also looking towards the white's king. And in some variations, you're actually going to remove this bishop somewhere, for example, capture that pawn on c4 and deliver a discovered check. And therefore, white needs to be really careful here. And some of your opponents will overlook this threat already. Anyway, let's see what a stronger opponent would do. A stronger opponent might wish to exchange the bishops and then play queen to d2. They must play their queen forward because you're also attacking that pawn on b2, in addition to attacking the white's king. Therefore, queen to d2. And now, even though it is okay for you to allow an exchange of queens, but you may also wish to keep the queens on the board so that you have greater chances for your attack, and you can go back queen to e7. Once again, you're threatening some discovered check here along the e file. And that's why white played queen to e3. Black responded knight to c6. Generally speaking, since this is a gambit line, you're aiming for quick development, and sometimes you're even ready to sacrifice a little bit of material, but to finish your development as quick as you can and to get to the opponent's king, because that is the ultimate aim. In this game, white played knight to f3. You may wonder, what if white goes pawn to d5? But in fact, a similar position would happen in this game, so you'll get that question answered. After knight f3, black played knight g4, trying to kick this queen away from the e-file so that if it happens, then you can again just deliver that discovered check along the e-file with your queen. Therefore, white didn't play that move. He played queen to e2, and black just castled. Also attacking the pawn on d4 now. Now your rook from d-file also becomes popular and joins the party. What if white plays d5 right here? Okay, let's spend a moment to analyze it. In this case, you can just finish your development by playing rook to e8. And even though you're sacrificing a piece, but your advantage in activity is so huge that you're just gonna crush white. For example, if they capture your bishop, you go queen to b4 check, opening up this e-file, and after they cover the king, you take the pawn with the rook, and now because of the pin, the white's queen is lost, and generally speaking, you've got a winning position. I just took a move back. We just analyzed that d5 is now dangerous for black, and in the game we're analyzing white played pawn to h3, kicking another knight away, but black still played rook to e8. It's really cool how you just play for attack without really caring about material sacrifices. And after white captured the knight, black still played queen to b4, and white played queen to d2. And at this point in the actual game, black took bishop takes g4 and he won the game afterwards. But there was another move which is a really beautiful combination. I love it so much. And the move is knight takes d4. It's still pity black didn't play it in their actual game, but you've got a chance to execute it in one of your games. What's the trick? You're leaving your queen unprotected, but if they capture it, there follows knight c2 check. The d-file is controlled by your rook, therefore they have to move the king forward, and here comes bishop takes c4 checkmate. It is a double check to the white's king with both your rook as well as the bishop, and therefore it is a checkmate. Really beautiful combination, and I really wish that you play it in one of your games because it's super beautiful. And also there is one more game which I love to share with you because it also shows some really interesting attacking options that you've got here. So white goes bishop to d2, you play queen to e7 to protect the bishop and to create some potential threats along the e file here. White trades the bishops and plays queen to d2, trying to provoke this trade of queens. And while we have just discovered in the previous game that it's okay for black to play queen to e7, keeping queens on the board, hoping for an attack. But there is actually the second option, which is also a very good option, which is to play knight to c6. You don't mind going into an endgame, but you want white to take on b4 so that your knight becomes active, because after this exchange, potentially, your knight becomes super active, threatening knight to c2, and even in an endgame, white still has a whole bunch of problems just because they're undeveloped while you are already attacking white. That is why white probably will not wish to do this. You may still wonder, what if they go pawn to d5, seemingly winning one of your pieces? It's not really the case, as you castle long side, pinning the pawn, therefore white still cannot capture your minor pieces right there. So they played knight to c3 here. And in this position, black played another cool move, bishop to g4, removing one of the pieces from this dangerous square, but also temporarily, at least, preventing white from castling long side, because white king would have to cross the attacked square, which is against the chess rules. That is why white played pawn to f3, black played rook e8 check, white covered the king, and black played the bishop back to f5. Now white finally castled, removing their king from the immediate danger, but of course the king is still vulnerable here, it is exposed and black still has various attacking opportunities. Black played knight to a5, right now threatening that pawn on c4. White played g4, attacking the bishop, it played back, and white played knight to h3, just trying to at least finalize their development. And while in this position black already could have simply taken the pawn, which was a really good option for black, but he decided to keep up the pressure and played knight to d7. He wants to bring this knight either to c5 or to e5 and just to bring even more pieces into the attack. White played knight b1 because indeed the black's pressure is uncomfortable and white is trying to eliminate all these black's pieces from the queen side, thus securing their queen. And at this point, black played an interesting move which I love to ask you to think about it and to find it yourself. So please think about this. How would you play here as black if it is your move? Please think about it and write it down in the comments below. In the actual game, black found this move and won the game within a few moves. By now we have already analyzed all of the main lines, but I want to give you one bonus line as a bonus for you for being persistent and staying around till the end of the video. There is a bonus line which is maybe even more powerful than the actual line I have shown you previously. At this point we still go pawn to e6, white recapture, and here we have analyzed the move bishop takes e6, which is certainly the strongest move objectively. But there is even a more aggressive approach. You can go knight to c6, sacrificing one more pawn, aiming for the quickest development and quick attack. And in blitz games in particular, I do believe that this move is a killer. Because after this exchange, you can just notice that black's already having a really huge advantage in development. They're ready to bring their bishop here, put their rook to e8, and start attacking the white's king. It is really not easy for white to find proper moves if they are not prepared, and you have a great chance to crush your opponents just within a couple of moves here. Most of your opponents would actually play here knight to f3, and this is really amazing because the most played moves by white give you a guaranteed victory. I switched it back to the database of games just to illustrate that what I'm sharing with you is real practical stuff which you can apply right after watching this video. Right, so let's see here. The most played move by white is pawn takes f7, you recapture. After that, the most played move by far is knight to f3, you go bishop g4, pinning the knight, and they play bishop e2 once again. Almost exclusively they play that. And after the exchange, you go bishop queen to d3, and it is just waiting for black. You can see here percentages of game won by white and black, and 83% won by black, 86, 82. This is crazy that black is just crushing into this line, and this position is probably already won by you. Let me show you exactly how. Alright, let's go over these moves once again. White plays knight to f3. They feel that their king is in danger and they want to, ideally speaking, finalize their development and castle it. But of course, you don't give them the time to do so. You play bishop g4, pinning the knight, they play bishop e2, and at this point you capture the knight, and after they recapture, you've got a powerful move, queen to d3, blockading the white's position entirely, cutting the white's king off his eventual castling, and preparing rook to e8. Therefore, white needs to cover his king. He plays bishop e2, you still play rook to e8, pinning the bishop, putting pressure here, threatening knight to d4, hoping to just win this bishop for nothing, and therefore white would have to probably move his king away. They can't castle here, by the way, because if they castle, you simply grab the bishop for nothing, right? Then the bishop lost protection, so they can't escape that easily. And that's why they may wish to play king to f1. Now, the bishop is free to capture your queen, and therefore you go back queen d4, but it still creates a really powerful threat of bishop to c5, threatening queen takes f2 checkmate. Therefore, white goes pawn to d3, you go still bishop c5, they play bishop e3, thinking that they got you. Now, you have to move the queen back, the bishop is hanging here, but you don't want to retreat, you want to attack. So you sacrifice the rook here, and after that queen takes e3, and it's easy to see why you sacrifice it. You're threatening queen to f2 checkmate. The only way to stop it is for white to play a bit awkward move, queen to e1. And here your attack is actually so strong that almost any logical move would win the game for you, actually. For example, the move like rook to e8 would definitely win. And after that, queen f4, or you can go for the most forced variation, queen take f4 check, bishop f3 is the only move, and then you go knight to g4, threatening knight to e3 check. And now the opponent's king is under the direct fire of the combined army of your pieces, and white is defenseless. It's okay for white to resign right here, or if they wish to play on and do something like knight to c3, just go knight e3 check, and there's really nothing white can do here. If king tries to hide somewhere there, there's a lot what you can do. For example, at least you can go knight c2, which is a discovered check, and then you can grab the queen. Or at least you can do that. If they try moving their king to the queen side, like king to e2, you go knight d4 check, and king f2, well, here you can win by lots of different options, knight g4, for example. If they go king to d2, in this case, you can play knight takes c4, discovered check, king d1 is the only move, and then knight takes b2, a pretty beautiful checkmate with a knight from b2, a pretty rare case where you can checkmate an opponent's king by the knight from the b2 square, but it is the case here. It is amazing how in many of the lines which I share with you, black is just winning within a few moves of this opening. It is so powerful. And actually a lot of the games that I shared with you were played by masters and grandmasters by white. Therefore, you can see that even strong players can be defeated by following the lines that I just shared with you. If you enjoyed it, please give a like to this video. Also, don't forget to attend my free masterclass, the best way to improve at chess instantly, by clicking the link below the video or on the screen, and keep crushing your opponents.